Chapter 1, Collision of Worlds. The night was perfect, the kind that Marcus Vitali had come to expect whenever his name graced the guest list of Rome's most exclusive events. The terrace of the Villa Borghese sprawled before him, offering a breathtaking view of the city below. With its endless twinkling lights, Rome seemed to shimmer like 1,000 stars scattered at his feet. It was a city full of history, power, and secrets, just like Marcus himself. He stood near the edge of the terrace, drink in hand, surveying the crowd. The most influential people in Rome mingled below: politicians, CEOs, artists, and socialites. They were all here, vying for attention, influence, and power. To Marcus, it was the same scene every time. The faces might change, but the hunger was always the same. Everyone in this city wanted something, and Marcus had learned long ago that the key to success wasn't wanting, it was knowing how to take it. He adjusted the cufflinks on his perfectly tailored suit, and the soft clink of the metal was a reminder of his place in the world. Marcus Vitali was a king among men to anyone who looked his way. As the CEO of one of Europe's largest media empires, he controlled the narrative and people's perceptions of reality. A few strokes of a pen, a well-placed article, or a breaking news story, and the world would bend to his will. But tonight, amidst the laughter and clinking of glasses, something, or someone, had captured his attention. She stood alone near one of the marble pillars, her back to the crowd, gazing out over the city. There was something in how she held herself, something different from the others. Her posture was elegant yet firm, her presence commanding yet subtle. She wasn't like the other women here, who were eager to be seen and admired. No, she seemed almost detached from the event, as if she were passing through, observing. Marcus sipped his champagne, his eyes narrowing as he studied her. Leah Gregorio. The name had recently been whispered in certain circles, though it did not come with the usual fanfare. Leah wasn't a politician or a celebrity, but she had earned a reputation nonetheless, one that intrigued Marcus more than he cared to admit. Leah ran a humanitarian organization that had become a thorn in the side of specific influential individuals, including people Marcus knew well. Her bold statements against government corruption and human rights violations had not gone unnoticed. They had earned her more enemies than friends in Rome's upper echelons. But she didn't seem to care. She wasn't playing the game, she was challenging it. And that made her dangerous. As Marcus continued to watch her, he felt a pull, an undeniable urge to know more. What was a woman like her doing at an event like this? She didn't belong here, not like the others did, at least. While the rest of the crowd was busy vying for attention, Leah stood apart, quiet, composed, as if the world around her didn't even matter. Curiosity piqued, Marcus went through the crowd, his footsteps silent on the polished marble floor. The noise of the party seemed to fade as he approached her, his mind focused solely on the enigma before him. "You don't seem like someone who enjoys these kinds of events," he said, his voice smooth, almost casual, as he came to stand beside her. For a moment, Leah didn't respond. She continued to look out over the city, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she turned her head, her dark eyes meeting his. There was no flicker of recognition, no sign that she cared who he was, or that she was impressed by the power he wielded. Marcus was used to people being intimidated by his presence. He thrived on it. But Leah's gaze was not just steady, it was unwavering. She wasn't scared, and that alone was enough to make him take notice. "You're right," she said coolly. "I don't." Her bluntness caught him off guard, but he didn't let it show. Instead, he smiled, a slight curve of his lips, intrigued by her sharpness. "Then why are you here?" he asked, genuinely curious now. "Surely there are better places to spend your time." Leah shifted her gaze back to the cityscape, her expression slightly softening. "I was invited," she said. "And sometimes, it's important to know what the enemy is up to." Marcus chuckled, the sound low and rich. "Enemy? I didn't realize I was your enemy." Leah's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, though it lacked warmth. "You represent everything that's wrong with this city," she said, her voice calm but cutting. "Your media empire spreads lies, covers up corruption, and feeds people the illusion that everything is fine when it's not." Her words stung more than Marcus expected them to. He had heard criticism before, people in his line of work were always a target, but Leah's words weren't just a critique of his work. They felt personal, as if she were challenging what he did and who he was. He felt a surge of anger and a hint of respect for her boldness. For a moment, Marcus found himself at a loss for words. He stared at her, and at that moment, he realized something profound. He was not just intrigued, he was fascinated. He wanted to know more. About her. About what she believed in. About why she looked at the world in such a different way. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a more intimate tone. Interesting perspective. But don't you think it's a little naive? The world isn't as black and white as you think. Sometimes power is necessary to maintain order. Leah turned to face him fully now, her eyes narrowing just slightly. And sometimes power corrupts, she shot back, not missing a beat. You think you're controlling the narrative, but you're just another puppet in someone else's game. Her words hit like a punch to the gut. Marcus had built his empire on the idea that he was in control, that he was the one pulling the strings. But Leah's gaze held a mirror up to him, forcing him to see himself differently. For a moment, he felt a twinge of doubt, a crack in the facade of his confidence. Was he just a pawn in a giant game? He should have been angry. He should have dismissed her and walked away. But instead, he felt something else he hadn't felt in a long time. Excitement. Curiosity. A desire to prove her wrong. Leah didn't wait for a response. She turned back to the city, her posture relaxed as if their conversation hadn't just thrown Marcus off balance. He wasn't finished with her, though. Wait, he said, his voice more serious now. Let me buy you a drink. Just one. I'd like to hear more about how you see the world. For the first time, Leah hesitated. Her expression softened for a moment, and Marcus thought he saw a flicker of something, perhaps interest? But just as quickly, it was gone. She shook her head, her voice softer now. No, she said. You wouldn't understand. And with that, she disappeared into the crowd as effortlessly as she had appeared. Marcus watched her go, the noise of the party slowly returning to his awareness. He should have been annoyed, even insulted by her dismissal. But instead, he found himself more intrigued than ever. Marcus Vitali met someone who didn't care about his power, wealth, or influence for the first time in years. Vitali had met someone who didn't care about his power, wealth, or influence. Someone who wasn't afraid to challenge him. And that made her dangerous. Dangerous, and fascinating. As the party continued around him, Marcus made a decision. Leah Gregorio wasn't just an enigma. She was a puzzle he intended to solve. And the first step to solving a puzzle was finding the right pieces. Chapter 2, The Chase begins. Marcus Vitali was not easily rattled, but something had shifted inside him ever since that night at the Villa Borghese. Leah Gregorio's words, sharp as a blade, had cut through the layers of control he prided himself on. They had met at a charity event, a gathering of Rome's elite, where Marcus had expected to be the center of attention. But Leah, with her piercing gaze and unwavering stance, had made it clear that she saw through his facade. Days had passed since their brief exchange, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that she had seen through him in a way no one had before. He had always known how to manage people and how to manipulate situations to his advantage. It was his job, after all. Controlling the narrative made him powerful. But Leah, she wasn't playing by the same rules. She didn't care about his empire, influence, or wealth. She had made it clear that she despised everything he stood for. And that was precisely what fascinated him. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his gaze focused on the skyline of Rome outside his office window. The city sprawled before him, a mosaic of ancient history and modern ambition. It thrived on power, on deals made behind closed doors, and on secrets whispered in the dark. It was a city where a man like Marcus could rise to the top, and a city where a woman like Leah could be a dangerous adversary. She hadn't been easy to find. After their encounter, Marcus had his people dig into her background. What he discovered only deepened his interest. Leah Gregorio wasn't just the head of a humanitarian organization. She was the heart of a movement, an underground network that provided aid to political dissidents and refugees, the very people Nero Ferraro's regime had labeled as threats to national security. Leah had connections to groups that operated in the shadows and worked to undermine the government's control. Marcus hadn't expected this. He knew she was outspoken and challenged the status quo, but her involvement in something dangerous made her more than just an idealist. She was a threat. And Marcus knew better than anyone what happened to threats in Rome: they were eliminated. But Leah wasn't just a threat to the regime. She was a threat to him. For the first time in a long while, Marcus questioned the world he had built, the empire he had created. He had always believed that power was the ultimate goal and that control was the only thing that mattered. But now, after his brief encounter with Leah, he wasn't so sure. His mind was a battleground of conflicting thoughts and emotions. He had to see her again. His determination was unwavering, driving him to seek out Leah despite the risks and uncertainties. Leah Gregorio moved through the crowded streets of Rome with the confidence that came from years of navigating danger. She had learned to blend in, to become just another face in the crowd, unnoticed and unremarkable. This skill she had honed while working with the underground network, and it had saved her life more times than she could count. Her resilience was a testament to her strength in the face of adversity. But today, as she walked through the bustling market district, Leah felt a prickling sense of unease. She couldn't quite place it, but something felt off. She had been more careful than usual in the days since the Villa Borghese event. Being seen at a gathering of Rome's elite had been a necessary risk, but it had put her on edge. And then there was Marcus Vitali. Leah had known who he was when he approached her at the party. She had done her research. Marcus Vitali was a man of immense power, a media mogul whose influence stretched far beyond Rome. He controlled the stories people believed, the truths they held onto. To Leah, he was the embodiment of everything wrong with the city, a man who profited from lies and manipulation, who upheld the very system she was fighting to dismantle. She had expected their encounter to be brief, but a few words were exchanged before he moved on to someone more interesting. But something in Marcus's eyes had unsettled her. He hadn't been dismissive or arrogant like so many others in his position. He had been curious, almost intrigued by her, and that made him dangerous. Leah had spent her life avoiding men like Marcus. Men with power, with influence. Men who could destroy everything she had worked for with a single phone call. But now, she couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus wasn't done with her. That he wouldn't just walk away and forget about their brief conversation. She pulled her scarf tighter around her neck as she slipped through the crowd, her senses on high alert. The market district was loud and chaotic, filled with vendors shouting about their wares, children running between stalls, and tourists snapping photos of the ancient ruins that dotted the city. It was the perfect place to disappear, but Leah couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. Her instincts told her to move faster, to get off the street and into the safety of her apartment. But she couldn't afford to be paranoid. There was too much at stake, too many people depending on her. She met with Peter Sarto later that evening, and there was no room for hesitation. She pushed aside her fear and focused on the task, a testament to her determination and resilience. Peter was one of the underground resistance leaders, a man who had been fighting against Nero's regime for years. He had once been a priest, but the government's brutalities had stripped him of his faith. He fought with a different conviction, and Leah trusted him more than anyone. As she approached the metro station, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Leah pulled it out and glanced at the screen, an unknown number. Her heart skipped a beat. She knew better than to answer unknown numbers. It was too risky. But something in her gut told her this wasn't just a random call. She hesitated momentarily before pressing the button and raising the phone to her ear. Leah Gregorio, a familiar voice said on the other end of the line. "We need to talk." Leah's blood ran cold. "Marcus," she said, her voice tight. "How did you get this number?" "That's not important," Marcus replied, his tone calm, almost casual. "What's important is that we meet. There are things you need to know." Leah's heart raced as she scanned the crowded street around her, her mind racing. "I'm not interested in anything you say, Marcus." "You should be," Marcus said, his voice lowering. "Because Nero Ferraro is planning something, You'll be caught in it. Leah's grip tightened on the phone. What are you talking about? Meet me at the cafe in Trastevere, Marcus said. Tonight. I'll explain everything. Before Leah could respond, the line went dead. She stood frozen for a moment, the phone still pressed to her ear, her mind spinning. Marcus Vitali was playing a dangerous game, and she didn't know if she could trust him. But she couldn't afford to ignore what he was saying, which was true, if Nero was planning something big. Leah took a deep breath, slipping the phone back into her pocket. She didn't have a choice. She had to find out what Marcus knew. Marcus sat in the dimly lit cafe in Trastevere, eyes scanning the entrance every few seconds. He wasn't sure if Leah would show up, but he had to take the risk. Ever since their encounter at the Villa Borghese, Marcus had been digging deeper into Nero Ferraro's plans, and what he had uncovered was disturbing. Nero had always been a ruthless leader, but now, it seemed, he was preparing for something much bigger, a crackdown on the resistance and anyone who posed a threat to his regime. And Leah, whether she realized it or not, was at the top of that list. Marcus had contacts within the government, people who owed him favors, and what they had told him left little room for doubt. Nero was planning a series of raids, targeting key members of the underground network. Leah's name had come up more than once. It was only a matter of time before Nero's forces came for her. Marcus wasn't sure why he cared. Leah wasn't his ally. She had made it clear that she considered him part of the problem. But there was something about her, something that made him want to protect her. He knew it was dangerous. Getting involved in Leah's world could jeopardize everything he had built. But Marcus felt a pull towards something other than power for the first time in years. Something deeper. He glanced at his watch, the seconds ticking by in agonizing silence. The cafe was quiet, the low hum of conversation blending with the soft clatter of dishes. It was the perfect place for a discreet meeting, but Marcus wondered if Leah had decided not to come as the minutes dragged on. Then, just as he was about to leave, the door creaked open. Leah stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room with the precision of someone used to being followed. She spotted Marcus almost immediately, and for a brief moment, their eyes locked. Marcus's heart skipped a beat. Leah made her way toward him, her expression unreadable. She moved with the grace of someone who knew exactly what she was doing, and Marcus couldn't help but admire how she carried herself. Confident. Strong. Unafraid. But he could see the tension in her posture, the wariness in her eyes. Leah Gregorio was not a woman who trusted quickly, and Marcus knew he had a long way to go before she would even consider listening to him. Leah sat down across from him, her gaze steady but guarded. You have 5 minutes, she said, her voice calm.